Welcome back to another episode of the Adventures of Disney Dad podcast. We have got our friend of the show, Matt Richardson. Many of you know is a content creator in the Disney and running space. And, he's one of our favorite guests we've had on the podcast. He's come on a number of times now. And if you haven't checked out his episodes, I will make sure to link those in the show notes also. So you can make sure you catch up on all things that we've talked about with Matt. We've talked about his content background and things like that in the past. And always fun to have you, Matt. So welcome back.
It's an honor to be back. I'm so glad to be back.
Yeah, it's fun, and we've got a really fun one. I get a lot of questions right when we run into the beginning of October, especially from guests that are planning trips with me that are doing Run Disney events, and we're really getting into Run Disney season. We've got Wine and Dine half marathon weekend this weekend. Marathon weekend is right around the corner in January. You've got Princess weekend thereafter, and then Springtime Surprise, and it's really the full gamut of the Run Disney experience is coming up, and so our goal in this episode is to talk to you about a lot of the nuanced planning and running experiences that you could have for a Run Disney race, because it's not the same as if you're running the Chicago Marathon that just happened, or New York, or any of those big running races, or your local community half marathon. The Disney races are very unique. It's a very different experience. There's a lot of nuance involved in the planning, and it's a lot of fun. And so we get a lot of detailed questions about that. And I think this episode is really geared for those first time Run Disney folks. But also, if you're like on the fence of considering doing your first Run Disney race, I think this will, relieve a lot of the concerns that a lot of people have. One of the biggest ones is like, I'm not a runner. How can I run a Run Disney race? Like, we're going to talk about that today. So before we get into detail, like about a lot of those nuanced questions, Matt, you have really been kind of, I don't want to say transitioning, but you've been doing a lot of Run Disney content for the last year or so now. And how did your relationship with Run Disney get started? Where did you fall in love with running in the Disney races?
So I've been a runner. I started as a runner in 2005. I was living in New York City at the time near Central Park. And I've loved running since then. And it wasn't until 2018 that I sort of merged my love of Disney parks and running when I did it was the Star Wars half marathon weekend in 2018. That was the last Star Wars one they had, if I remember correctly. And as soon as I did that half marathon weekend, I was hooked. I was like, oh, this is the right spot for me. This is a perfect merge of things I love, something that keeps me healthy and active. I love running. I love the competitive aspect of it. And of course, I love all the Disney stuff as well. So bringing those two things together made this an obvious thing for me. So since 2018, I've been running as many of the races I possibly can, just to, again, keep myself healthy, keep myself active. And also it's just, they are the funnest things to do. I've been meeting lots of people through it. And like, I'm the biggest advocate. And in the last year or two, I started doing the creator thing and bringing my camera along with me, which has its own challenges of shooting a video about running a race and sharing that experience. And I've gotten better at that. And actually, that content's been doing really well. And people like to see the race through my eyes. And I just have so much fun sharing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Do you think that having a race on the books has a big impact on your motivation for personal fitness?
If it weren't for racing, I wouldn't be a runner. That's absolutely. Racing is what keeps me going. I have something on the calendar I'm looking forward to that I'm working to. Now, I have had long periods where I haven't had a race on the calendar and I get out and I run a bit. But, having a goal ahead of you, something you're focused on, it gives purpose to what you're doing in that moment and it keeps you going. So I always have a race on the calendar and that keeps me as going as a runner.
I think that that's one thing that's unique about the Disney races, especially. Like you get to have a vacation on the calendar too, so you've
Yeah.
got that to look forward to a lot of times. And it's one thing that I've always struggled with, just because when I've run marathons, my wife is always like, you can go running and stay fit and not have a race or not have to go to Disney or whatever. Obviously, we could debate that all day, but the big thing for me is like I'm of the same mindset. Like having a race on the calendar, no matter how big or small, has a huge impact on my mental health and my physical health, because it keeps you accountable and it gives you something to look forward to, rather than like, why am I getting out here for 3 miles a day, this week? Like it makes it easier to sit on the couch kind of thing. Um, and the one benefit to that about the Run Disney races is like you have to book them so far in advance, registration is almost a year in advance. So you know that you're running this thing, and one way or another, you've got to find the time to get the training in, right? But one thing about Disney that a lot of people I don't think fully get, and maybe this applies to the parks in general too, but I think especially with Run Disney is, what makes Run Disney so special. So when you ran that first Star Wars half marathon, aside from your love for Disney, what about that race weekend really clicked for you, and what makes it feel so special?
So I've done other races before. What was special about the Run Disney races is that it is very high production quality. It's very large, has a large field, so a lot of runners. Just very well organized, very well run. It's got strong theming. It's got, and that theming carries across into the characters you see, the T-shirt you get, the medal you get, the way that the announcers are doing their bit in the beginning. All of that ties together under the theme. So there's just this cohesiveness to the whole weekend, and it's Disney. It's very well organized. They care a lot about giving you value for the money you spend, and you do spend a lot for it, but they give you value for the money you spend on it compared to other races, I think. And it's just through just high production value. It is every single runner amenity you could possibly imagine at a race. And it's just this is a top of the line race, even for the 5K. I was watching them do this 5K, and they've got fireworks, they've got live announcers, they've got like a live camera feed going, and I'm thinking to myself, I have never seen a 5K like this in my life.
Yeah, it's not your neighborhood turkey trot.
Right,
Like
right.
it's nothing like that. And I think, the one thing that I've always compared it to, because I've done, the Chicago Marathon a couple times. I've done a lot of local races like you have. And the biggest thing for me is like between spectators and entertainment value and where you're running, right? There's always something to look at and always something engaging. And, for those that haven't run a marathon, you get to that like 18 to 24 miles. You've been running for 3 hours. In Chicago, like it's fun, don't get me wrong, but like there's areas where you're like, this is dragging. At Disney, even when you're in the backstage areas or you're on the side of a highway, they've always got something going on. And there's always, you add in that there's the runners, other runners are part of the entertainment, right? You've got people in costumes that run in costumes the entire race. And there's a lot for to me, it's like way more mentally engaging. And it brings up the upbeat nature of the entire thing comes up to another level, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There's a mental when it comes to running a race, you've got your sort of physical aerobic, your muscular, your all that stuff that goes into training. There's a bit of a mental thing as well to when it comes to running a race that is a longer distance, and distraction helps, right? And having all that stuff going on around you, it's just a fun vibe that people are in good spirits. They're really excited. You're seeing people's costumes, you're seeing backstage areas, you're seeing you're running by your favorite rides through the parks. um, Incredibly motivating, incredibly fun. It's just it's such a great way to run a race.
And building off of that, let's say somebody's interested, and I feel like everybody in the Disney community at some point hears about Run Disney and they get a little bit of that itch, and then they say, well, I'm not a runner, right? I'm not an athlete, I've never been an athlete. What advice do you have for someone that's nervous about signing up for a Run Disney race because they feel like they're not an athlete or not a runner?
There is not a more beginner friendly race out there than a Run Disney race. These races, the way they are conducted, very, very beginner friendly. They welcome runners of all abilities. You'll see all types of people running out there. You'll see tons of people doing their first race. You're not going to be alone if this is your first race, and they're super supportive. And I think that it's a great place. It's a great spot to get into running. And I think there's a lot of people out there who got their start with running and were motivated to run because of Run Disney, because it is so welcoming to beginners. And that's great. You see runners of all abilities.
The feeling of inclusion when you're on that race course
And
is completely different. The first time I ran the Disney Marathon, it would have been 2013. So I was fresh off being a college football player, and I felt like I was a great athlete at that point in time in my life. And you've got people that are older, they're a different body type than you, and they are smoking you on that race course. And it's because like it doesn't matter, right? Like, none of that stuff registers in terms of performance. Nobody even thinks about it really. You're out there having fun with the 80-year-old dad that is running his 15th dopey challenge, and you're running your first 5K or whatever. It's the feeling of inclusion in all body types and all age groups, like everything, I think is really important. There's nobody out there that will ever belittle you for not being a quote runner or not being able to run fast. You get that on social media, and I'm sure, Matt, like you get that in the comments section of TikTok, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that just doesn't happen, at those
Yeah.
races.
There was a guy who saw some of my content and was encouraged to jump into a Run Disney race. And he did his first one. He got back in touch with me. And the way he described it, he said the vibes were immaculate.
Yes,
So,
that's that. I mean, that really is it. And I would talk to runners, like having done Chicago a couple times, and you've done these other big races, and everybody's like, oh, Chicago and New York are the best, and I'm like, just give a Run Disney race a shot, because it's a completely different experience and vibe. And it's not just because it's at Disney, but it's because that Disney quality and showmanship is throughout. But that said, like Matt touched, it can be expensive. It can be a little hard to register, and there's some other nuances here that I think are important. So if you're coming down for a Run Disney race, whether it's this coming weekend or the marathon weekend, there are some challenges, and one of the biggest ones that I think runners get frustrated with is how early you have to get up. And you're talking about 5 a.m. start times, leaving your resort at 2 or 2:30 in the morning to get on the buses, spending a lot of time waiting around in the corrals because there's so many people for these races. I want to get into the nuance of that, Matt. What advice would you have for those first time runners going down this weekend in terms of routine and what to expect on the morning of a race?
you're going to have to do a little bit of math, right? You're going to have to look at what, the start time is, when you want to get into the corral. There'll be in the runner guide some information about when the corrals are going to close, depending on what corral you're assigned to. And then you're going to want to decide how much time you want in the start area. And there's stuff going on in the start area. You're going to rewind all the way back. And I do this every time. I kind of like reinvent the wheel. Every time I have a race, I just double check, like, do I have enough time to get from my car through security to the front, and so there's a bit of a logistical thing you've got to figure out a bit, so that you can be ready to race at 5 a.m. It is tough, and it's actually for the marathon now. It's 4:30 in the morning. It
Yeah,
starts.
well, and that the big reason people always ask, why do they do that? One is park logistics,
Yeah.
right? They've got to make sure that because you're running through the theme parks, they let spectators in to the parks for free to watch you. They've got to get you out before operating hours is part of it. But the other part of it, in specifically with marathon weekend, is the weather. And you can have some marathon weekends where there's snow during the
Right.
race, and then you can have others where it's too hot to continue running and they've got to cut the race short. So, there's a lot of logistical hurdles that Disney is trying to operate within. And basically, they're starting earlier in the day to keep you healthy. They're trying to make sure that everyone's safe. They're not running, when it's 80 degrees outside and you've been on the course for 6 hours. And at that point, there's physical, health risks to people. So the earlier that they can start, the better for that reason. And I don't blame them. And for those of you that like aren't familiar, and like you're new to running, and this is one of your first weekends, the corrals are basically they're like fenced in areas, typically based on your speed. So you get an opportunity to provide a qualifying time for a prior race if you think that you're going to run a little bit faster than normal, and they may put you towards the front. Or if you have a history, with Run Disney races, like Matt, I'm guessing you're closer to Corral A, like up at the front. But when you're talking about 15,000 people, each corral is a fenced in area with a lot of folks in it. And what that creates is a little bit of a bottleneck on the course. So they'll let corral A go, and then they'll wait 5 or 10 minutes and corral B will go. And the problem with that at Run Disney races in particular is if you don't have a qualifying time and you're like, I'm running my first race. I don't know what, pace I expect to be at. Maybe I'm, 4:30, 5 hour marathon. You might end up being in the very back, and you're with people that are similarly paced or slower. And it creates, a little bit of a hurdle trying to get in and out of people if you're faster. But also going back to what Matt said, like you've got those logistics of, all right, if the race starts at 4:30, my corral may not start until 5:30. And at that point, you've been standing there for 2 hours in the cold morning. And that, I think, is the biggest criticism, at least that I've read of Run Disney, of anybody that's not, quote, happy, is it's a lot of standing around, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely a lot of standing around and waiting. You don't want to miss your start. You want to get into your corral. Usually you want to get up as close up to the front as you can so you can get started sooner. It
Right.
does take a little bit of thinking. And that the thing you mentioned about proof of time is important. Making sure you get seated into the right corral. You generally, when you run any race, you want to be around runners who are running around the same speed, and they put some effort to kind of group people in that way so that the fastest runners are in the front, the slowest runners are in the back. I did my first in that 2018 Star Wars race. I didn't have a proof of time to submit because it had been too long since I had done a race. There's like a limited qualifying window, and it was a rough race for me. I wanted to get out there and run. Maybe I think it was probably around then. I was doing a between a 1:45 2 hour half marathon. I was way in the back, and I was dodging people. I was running around people. It was a tough race for me because I spent so much energy trying to get around people. So getting seated into the right corral is going to be helpful for your performance. So having a proof of time is definitely helpful. But I see people concerned about it all the time, where they don't have a proof of time and they think it's going to ruin everything. Don't worry about it too much. You hopefully you can find your pack. You can find that group of runners who are running around the same pace you are. If not, you might be dodging people, or people might be passing by you. It's just the way these races go sometimes.
That was 100% like the biggest learning experience I ever had in running, was that first Run Disney race that I ran, running through the grass to
Yeah.
try and get around groups of people that are, there's a lot of people that do what's called the Jeff Galloway method at Disney, where it's run walk. So they'll run for a minute, walk for 30 seconds or whatever their pace might be. But like when you get 20 people that all of a sudden start walking right in front of you, and there, we could do you could do a whole other episode on runner
Etiquette. Mhm.
etiquette and stuff like that. But like you end up running the same time, and you're giving out double the energy to try and get around all these people, and that builds into the same thing, which when you're talking about your corral and your pace, the next biggest question that I get is, what are the Run Disney balloon ladies, because everyone is telling me that they're frightened of them. Matt, I'm guessing that you've never had to experience that, or you haven't seen them. But for
No.
those that aren't familiar, can you explain what those Run Disney balloon ladies are?
Yes, so because Disney has to reopen the roads that you're running on, there is a limited amount of time that you have to complete the race. So they have, and if you read the runner's information for every race, it says it pretty clearly. 16, I think it's 16 minutes per mile you have to run, which is a very generous amount of time. And that starts from when the last person starts the race. So running at that 16-minute mile from when the last person starts the race, you have to keep up at least that pace so that you don't get swept. Swept means you get removed from the course and you're not able to finish the course. Because they need to be able to clean up and open the roads up again. Every race is going to have every race you go anywhere is going to have some element of some limit. They can't keep the finish line open forever. They can't keep the roads closed forever. And Disney does a pretty good job of keeping that sweep moving at that 16-minute pace. So when you're training and when you're thinking about what race you want to do, what distance you want to do, it's for a lot of people, they have to keep that in mind if they're going to spend a lot of time walking, or which is fine. You are absolutely allowed to walk. You do just need to be mindful that there is a limit to how much time you have to do that. And that's what the balloon ladies are all about. If they get ahead of you, you are in danger of being swept. And being swept means they put you on a bus and they bring you back to the where the finish line is.
And for those that aren't familiar, and it gets like a unique connotation for Disney, because at other races there's not somebody with these balloons. These are actually like runners slash walkers keeping that pace with Disney Mickey balloons in their
Right.
hands so that you know who they are. And if you see them coming, you know you got to get moving basically. And what else is unique is that people will train and they'll think like, oh, I've got plenty of time. I run a 5 hour marathon or whatever. And but then they get in the race and they start, they take a bathroom break and then they see the characters, right? And the characters can throw off your entire race because there's a lot of really unique characters on the course that you don't necessarily see anywhere else in the parks. And you're like, oh, I really want to get a picture with that, this person. And you go and you're running by and there's 20 people in line, right? Waiting in that line is a decision that you're making that's probably going to cut 10, 15 minutes off of your race time. And you've basically increased your pace by 30 seconds to a minute just by doing that one photo. And I think a lot of people that are even fast runners, they forget about it, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh crap!" There's the end of the line there, and they're having to start getting moving. And so it's a borderline irrational fear if you've trained and planned properly, but it is something that's realistic because every year you read about people getting swept off the course that have been doing dopey. They've done 3 races and now they're on the marathon and unfortunately they get swept off. So it's an unfortunate part of racing, but it's something that you have to be mindful and plan for because every race has to do it. It's just Disney, I think, gets a lot more casual runners, those people that aren't runners. They're not used to it, they don't know how to plan for it, and then they spend a little too much time walking, too many characters, and they're off, unfortunately.
So do you stop? Are you one of the kind of guy who stops for all the characters you possibly
I,
can,
I
or?
have never stopped for a character photo during a Run Disney race. In part because the first time I ran it, I'm like, I just want to finish, and I have no idea, how fast I'm going to go. So I'm not for the same reason everybody talks about. I'm not going to risk it. And I feel like for the most part, you don't either. You usually take videos and photos as you're going by, right?
I do stop. I have a policy. I have some policies, some rules that which I'll stop. Is that sometimes I can get out ahead of the pack, and there is little to no wait for a character. If there's no one waiting, I can just bolt right up there, get a picture fast, and move on. And I'll only do that if the character is appealing to me in some way, unique, rare. If I see Chip and Dale, I always want to get them because I like them. If it's Mickey and Minnie, I want to get a picture with them because it's just iconic. So, but usually, yeah, I'm more concerned about my time than getting character photos.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those run your race things, right?
Yeah.
Some people that's why they want to do the 5K and the half because they may take that a little less seriously from a time perspective than the marathon, or vice versa. Whatever is your interest, I think is the beauty of it. And there's lots of opportunities for everybody there. And the biggest thing is that it's logistical planning that can really really screw up your race there. And you've got to think about it. The other part of it too is that you never know who's going to be there. You find out when you're running, like they don't tell you in advance this character is going to be at this mile. Which, and now that I'm thinking about that out loud, I feel like would be a really beneficial thing for them to do. But man, I don't know.
There's a little bit of communication that happens through some groups where the people who are out ahead will post online, and then the people further back can pull up their phone, the right Facebook group, whatever it is, and they can know like who's out ahead. It's unbelievable. The lengths that people go to understand what characters are out there, get the right character photos that they want, and finish their race. It's a whole thing. I can barely wrap my head around.
The Run Disney community is crazy,
Yeah.
and in a great way.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's other things that people stop for, which this is where it's like always blown my mind. Right? Have you ever stopped to ride a ride during one of the races?
No, I haven't. I'm way too fixated on time to do that. I've got no time for that.
I'm the same way. I remember the marathon in particular. Like a lot of people wanting to do Everest
Yeah.
or do Tower of Terror, and I'm like, those are more towards the end of the race, and at mile 20 ish or whatever. And at that point, I'm like, that's the last thing I want to do. I want to get in my bed. I want to be done with this thing as soon as possible. But you get people that will stop and they'll run races, and Disney allows it. Because by the time you get to Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom for some of the races, the parks are open at that point. The other one is that people get to the boardwalk and they'll have margaritas or they'll have
Oh,
beers.
gosh.
Spectators handing them like I think there's, Mike Rallman that runs the Be Our Guest podcast. I know I used to listen to. He used to always get a margarita every time he's coming around the boardwalk, and I'm like, that is the last. I'm not one of those like post race beer guys, so I can't. I certainly can't imagine doing it during a race. But there's so many unique things that people that run Disney races have come up with that they keep as traditions that I always just find interesting, in the way that they pull it off.
Yeah.
And conversely, people qualify for Boston
Yeah.
at Run Disney races. And fingers crossed that's going to be you at some point in the future.
One
But
day I
I'm
hope
open
I'm
to
hoping one day I can make it happen. I'm working
it.
towards that.
It's going to happen for you. I can feel it, and it's fun to watch you as it goes along. There's a lot of horror stories that I think people read about Run Disney races, about bus transportation and things that can get you a little amped up, like those Run Disney balloon ladies. And in part, I'm kind of like, stay off Facebook, right?
Yeah.
As much as you want to tell people to get involved in the community, there's also a little bit of fear mongering from like other beginner runners. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, everything you need to know is provided officially by Run Disney themselves. That's truly the everything you need to know. There'll be a runner's guide, you'll get it in your email. It tells you every specific thing you need to know. I get the instinct to want to go out to Facebook or go to Reddit or read what's being talked about wherever and consume as much as you can because you're nervous or you're excited or you're just eager about everything and you want. This is the way I am too. I just want to like consume every bit of content I can about it, and it can get into your head. It can psych you out a bit. There's just a way that everyone's race is going to be different. Everyone's race weekend is going to be different. What they prioritize is going to be different. There are people I've encountered before who are in a total panic because their costume isn't ready. And it's like, to me, I'm like, I don't even like, who cares about the costume? Just, like it's a different thing for everyone. Or people are under the impression that if they don't have a costume, is that okay? And it's like, yeah, get off of Facebook. Just, do what works for you and focus on the official information.
Every year I get somebody that they're booking their room for a marathon weekend, and they're like, what resort do you recommend? And I'll ask them, well, what are you thinking? And they'll say, I'm not booking Coronado because I read that 5 years ago a bus from
Right, got
Coronado to
lost
the
or something.
race
Yeah,
didn't get there or something like that. And I'm like, come on. like,
yeah.
like you can't believe everything that you read on the internet, and everybody has a negative running story at some point, and it gets a little ridiculous. But one of the things I always think about when I was just thinking through those logistics, I'm like you, like I want to stay in a routine, I want to have things planned out, I don't want to be surprised on the day of a big race. And when you're getting up at 2:30 in the morning, fueling is such a big deal in running. um, if you've never run before, you'll start to realize that really quickly as you start to do these longer runs. Like, fueling your body during a run is something you have to plan out, because your stomach isn't going to react well to certain things, and you've got to get used to it. One of the biggest concerns I had was, getting up at 2:30 in the morning, nothing's open to eat. Like, what am I going to have for breakfast, or how am I going to fuel my run? What is your kind of go-to routine for Run Disney races for fueling up before the race?
Yeah. So for me, having some carbs when I wake up far enough in advance so that it's digested enough before the race starts is important. So when I wake up, it's like a bagel. I have ready for me bagel, jam, coffee. Bagel with jam and coffee, and just like for me, it's what works for me. I've done so many races and had some breakfast like that beforehand. Having it far enough in advance before I start running is helpful, and then having on me the nutrition I need during the race is helpful as well. But yeah, you have to plan and you have to know what works for you, because that's a trial and error thing, as you said. Like, when you're in training and you're doing your long runs, you need to also be training and understanding how your body's reacting to different kinds of fuel out there. What thing can you eat that's going to work for you? What thing doesn't work for you? You really do have to dial that in and figure that out. You don't want to be doing anything new on race day, right? So if you didn't eat a banana before your long runs, don't try eating a banana before your race if you can help it, because you don't want anything unexpected or unpredictable to happen. It's really important. Nothing new on race day.
A lot of people get in that exact scenario at Disney, because they'll have like those little runner boxes at the
Right.
resort that they'll sell the night before, so that you have a breakfast available, right? So it could be peanut butter and jelly, a banana, bagel. But the problem is people will end up just getting it because they're like, oh, I didn't think through my options, and now I don't have anything else. And usually I eat a muffin with jam, and now I have to eat a bagel. And you're like, oh, it shouldn't make that big of a difference. It's a huge difference. It really is. Like your body after running 26 miles, it just doesn't react the same way, and so you don't want to have something new, like Matt said. But the good thing is there are options there. You can always have groceries delivered to your resort, so you can get what you normally have delivered to your resort, and you've got things to do in the days in advance to really prepare yourself to make sure you're in the same routine. And to that end too, Matt, how would you recommend, how early getting in for race weekend? So let's say the main race, the half or the full is on Saturday or Sunday. Usually at these weekends, you've got a smaller race on either Thursday or Friday also, and the expo starts Tuesday or Wednesday. How early are you getting in for these race weekends?
I think it's important that people understand that you definitely have to get in with enough time so that you can go to the expo the day before. You must. You must go to the expo the day before. So keep that in mind when you're booking. I prefer even going the day before that, just so that I can relax and then maybe go to the expo first thing in the morning on the day I want to go, or go to the expo the first day it opens, because it'll open the day before the first race, and you might want to check out what merch they have. So with planning, and I do see people make this mistake sometimes. They might plan a flight, which maybe it's like leaving their hometown at noon the day before the race. That gives them not a big window to make any mistakes or to have any flight delays or any issues, because you really do have to get to that expo beforehand so that they can get your bib and get over to the race the next morning. You don't want to shortchange yourself on that. So for me personally, I was always trying to get there at the latest the day before, in the very first thing in the morning, or before that, the day before.
And building off of that, the expo is like an experience in and of itself that's
Right.
worth making sure you check out. And the merch is always so competitive.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing. Like I've told Matt before, I paid $300 for a Spirit jersey hoodie one year, that was the only piece of merch that I really wanted. And before I even got down there, they were sold out. Because to Matt's point, you're talking about marathon weekend. There's a 5K Thursday, a 10K Friday, half marathon Saturday, and the full marathon Sunday. For me, if I'm only running the full marathon on Sunday, I may not come in until Thursday or Friday. At that point, the expo's been open for 2 days, and a lot of the stuff, unfortunately, is picked over and gone.
Or
And
goes to
so
resellers and
yeah, it's on eBay, and suckers like me are picking it up. And and I hate to say that. Like I wish I wasn't part of the problem, and I acknowledge that I'm part of the problem sometimes. But when you have something that you really want and you want to spend your own, like, it's nobody else's business what I spend my money on.
yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
like if I want to buy it, I'm going to buy it, and I don't particularly care how much it costs. So that just kind of is what it is. But that becomes a more expensive vacation too. That's, and you're like, if you're going to go down to be there the first day of expo opening on a Tuesday, you've now created at a minimum almost a 6 day Disney vacation also, and everything kind of goes up in expense.
My latest thinking on the merch thing is that, when you run this race, you'll pay a hefty registration fee. And as I said, they deliver on this. You are, in exchange for that, you're going to have a great race experience. They're going to give you a free t-shirt. So you're at least going to get a t-shirt included with your race registration. When you finish, you're going to get a medal as well. In my mind, I've been trying to say, hey, you know what? These are great things to have from this race. Do I really need another t-shirt or another, there's all these other things that you're gonna go into that shop and you're gonna see all these great things that look so cool, and it's like, oh, I want that finisher jacket or whatever. I'm trying to like dial that way. I have way too much race apparel.
So it's funny because it hurts that you said that. I put two of my Run Disney marathon weekend jackets, the track
Mhm.
jackets, into storage because I've literally never worn them. And so like I don't know what I was thinking. I bought both colors because at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I really, really want that. And then you're like, I'm not wearing this yellow and blue,
Right.
Mickey covered finisher jacket from 5 years ago anymore. Like it needs to go into storage. And at some point, I'm sure my kids will love it as a throwback thing from their dad 20 years from now. But like, to your point, a lot of it in the moment, you're just like, I want it all. It's my first race. I've got to have all the memories. And it's like, you're not, you're not going to wear it that much. And
The-
I've lived that experience for
and
sure.
they know what they're doing. The merch looks good. I go into the shop every time and I'm like, this merch looks good. I like what they're doing. I get what they're doing here, but I've got so much. I've got plenty. I'm trying to like, winnow my collection down a little bit.
I say that as I can see underneath my desk
Uh
the new Brooks running shoes.
yeah.
They've got a new partnership, and each race has their own unique shoes now. So like they do trying to hit you for all the different things, and I those shoes have never left my house. I call them my house tennis shoes. So like they do get you, for quite a few things there, but it is worth going, to have that opportunity and getting there in advance for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and you must go to the expo to get your bib, to get your t-shirt, and then there's exhibitors as well there. There's just like vendors who sell running things that you might need to pick up. Is it, you missed your headband or something, whatever. They give you a preview of the medals. There'll be course map. There's runner relations there. Basically, that's Runner Central. And so the expo as a whole is a great thing. The merch is just one part of it.
Right. And honestly, Matt, people also forget how long that takes. I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever been to the expo and it taken less than an hour. Would you agree with that?
So yeah, I skip. Sometimes I'm like, if I'm working that day, because I'll
Yeah.
work from down here, I'll run, get my bib, get my shirt, and I've got it down to a science how fast to get there. But you've got to be focused, straight through to beeline, because they put the shirts on the way other side, so that you've got
Yep.
to kind of weave through the vendors a little bit. But yeah, there is a lot to see. There's a lot to check out there. So, but yeah, I think an hour makes sense. You could spend more time there, but I think you have to be really focused if you want to spend less time.
Yeah, it just it becomes, getting there from, the buses. And
Yeah.
Matt, you typically drive.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be buses from the resorts that are going, and everybody knows the bus process can take a while, and there's no other easy transportation method, and it can become a thing. You're going in multiple buildings over at the ESPN Wide World of Sports, so it's something that you shouldn't be planning on trying to like run and take your kids to the parks after going to the expo, because the whole process just takes way longer than you think it's going to every time, in my experience. Um, one of the things that Matt, that I really want to touch on is, if you're doing a first Run Disney race, all Run Disney races are not created equal. They've all got a different vibe. They've all got a different experience. A lot of them have different, race types that you can do. When you talk about Springtime Surprise, for example, how would you rank them if somebody's doing their first Run Disney race? What would you prioritize to encourage someone to do?
So, I actually don't distinguish too much between the different races. They all have a few strengths and weaknesses, but I think there's a surprising uniformity between every Run Disney half marathon you can do. Now they are different; they have differences, but you're getting this sort of same level of high production quality. The way that the races are run and organized are fundamentally the same. I would say the thing that kind of would tip me over to one particular race or another is the way the course is. So how the course moves through the property. So in my opinion, a course that goes from it starts at Epcot, goes up to Magic Kingdom, and goes through Cinderella Castle is a better course, because going through Magic Kingdom before it opens and going through Cinderella Castle and getting that photo op, great, love that.
That I think that is the number one
Yeah.
photo experience that you want,
Yes, you
for
want
sure.
that. Yeah, you absolutely want that. So marathon weekends likely, and by the way, there's no guarantee that the course stays the same. But over the last few years, it's marathon weekend does that, Princess Weekend does that, right? Is there any others?
Not that I'm aware
Yeah,
of. But to Matt's point, it is always subject to change, and
right,
it's long after you register that
right.
you
You
find
don't
out what the
know.
course is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they do make subtle changes, and I remember specifically the one reason, and it's the same reason that I tend to recommend Marathon Weekend to first time runners. Obviously, it's the only marathon option. So every other Run Disney weekend, you only have half is the highest it goes. But it's the only one that you're guaranteed to run through all four parks. And I to me that's part of the experience, and I do think that Princess Weekend, it's a given that you do get a different crowd. You get a lot more women. You get a lot more mother daughter generational experiences. It's a different crowd, I think. Surprise Springtime Surprise, you get I think more Disney enthusiasts and less runner enthusiasts, just because of the time of year it is.
Mm.
And then Wine and Dine, I feel like you get more older folks. Like
Hmm.
you get just from a generation, and I think it's because, specifically because, there's a lot of older generations that want to experience Wine and Dine Weekend, and so you don't get as many of like, and they're not on winter break. Marathon Weekend is usually right at the end of winter break for colleges and high school kids, and I do think you get a lot of younger runners at Marathon Weekend. That's like my anecdotal, experience. But I do think that it is a little bit different crowd, and you definitely get a different vacation experience. January used to be the weekend that I was like, this is the best weekend ever to go to Walt Disney World. Now it's not as much of a hidden gem. It's a lot more crowded, but from a weather perspective, it's a lot cooler. It's usually not as crowded that week because it's kind of after the holiday crowds have gone. But that's not the same. Like, it's a lot more crowded for Springtime Surprise at Walt Disney World.
Right.
So I think that all
Mm.
kind of factors into it too. But Marathon Weekend would be the one that I tend to recommend for people, because I think it's that quintessential experience.
It absolutely is. One thing I would caution about marathon weekend is that, let's say you just want to do a half marathon. You're not the culminating event that weekend. The
That's true.
big one is the Sunday event. That's the big full marathon. The half marathon would be on Saturday. And what I found the first time I participated in marathon weekend, I was only doing the half marathon, and there was a lot of conversation about dope people, who's out there doing dopey, who's coming back to run the full for the other challenge, and I kind of felt like, oh, I'm not. This isn't the keystone event here.
Matt, oh my gosh, like in the way you phrased it, it was the worst feeling in the world to only be running the marathon. And I
Right.
say that in air quotes, right? I'm only running the marathon when you've got all these other people that are running dopey. And don't get me wrong, dopey's a huge accomplishment, but so is a half marathon, so is a
Yeah.
10K.
Right.
Like, for a lot of people, like that, it's not only a half marathon. You're a runner. You ran a half marathon. You ran 13 miles. It's a huge accomplishment, and to Matt's point, it can kind of feel, even the marathon. I remember vividly feeling that way, that I was only running the marathon, and it was like, that doesn't feel very inclusive. Like, it kind of, some people would make you feel kind of crappy about it.
Yeah. It's a dopey is like the pinnacle Run Disney achievement.
It is.
I've never done it. I hope to one day do it. When I get my other goals, I've got other goals in the way first, but one day I hope to do Dopey. It's the pinnacle achievement. So that weekend comes, that becomes the what the focus is on. It makes sense, but yeah, if you're just doing a race or two that weekend, you're kind of feeling like, oh, okay, I'm not one of those Dopey guys.
Yep, and I had signed up for Dopey this year. I hadn't told anybody. I think I told you, but I had told only close friends. And then we found out we were pregnant with twins, and so that went out the window. So I haven't had to train, but that's what I go back to before, is like, I haven't had the motivation to train because I knew we were pregnant, and I'm like, I'm not going to run this race. So you have way less motivation to do that. But one thing to keep in mind that I want to make sure that we mention, because I on a personal level, with everything that I try and do with our podcast and the website, one of the things that I take the most pride in is the charity options for Run Disney races, and I really try and do as much as I can to get the word out there when they have bibs available. And a lot of people read, that registration is so difficult, and it's a lottery, and you have to have all these browser windows open. All those things are true, but don't forget about the charities. And Matt, I want to make sure we include your charity in the show notes too, because Matt's doing it for the Boys and Girls Club, right?
Yep.
There are charity options, and there's usually anywhere from 10 to 30 depending on the race weekend, and each race they'll have various fundraising levels. Some of them are very reasonable, just a little bit more than the registration. Some of them can be more expensive, like the national charities, Doug Flutie Foundation. Like, some of those, they've got higher fundraising requirements. But if you're considering a Run Disney race and you've like missed registration or you tried and you didn't get in, look at those charity options because there are a lot of really, really good high quality charities that are doing a lot of great things with your money that really deserve consideration. And I want to try and find more ways to get them airtime on the podcast and highlight these folks because there's just so many that are doing really good things and people get intimidated by that idea of having to raise money, right? If you've got a social following, it's still not easy.
right?
Would you agree with that? I mean,
Well, yeah, yeah.
it,
I,
it,
it
it's it's tough.
it can be tough asking people for money. It's a tough thing to do.
Yeah,
But if you can find a personal connection with a charity, or you can understand the meaning, or you can communicate the meaning of a particular charity, and you put that true, authentic feeling out there, I think people will read that and understand what you're doing, and help you get across the line as it comes to when it comes to the fundraising requirements.
yeah. And the last thing I want to mention, Matt, before we wrap things up, is the last question that I get most frequently, and it's what Run Disney or when you go to a Run Disney race, what Disney resort would you typically recommend somebody books for ease of access or whatever other criteria you would throw out there? Which resorts stick out to you?
So I see this question a lot, and before we got our home down here, I had come to Disney to run races just for the weekend, and honestly, and you're not going to like this answer because it's kind of a non-answer, I think, but every single resort has really good busing to and from the start and finish and the expo, and in my mind, I would absolutely think more about what resort just do you like? What resort would you like to be at? Don't think too much. Again, this is my opinion. Don't think too much about how convenient it is to anything race related, because generally it's pretty equal. Yes, there are some that are geographically closer that have a shorter bus ride, but there are tons of buses. Everyone is going to get there, no problem. And with exceptions here or there we've discussed, but like I think it's more important that you stay a place you like on a race weekend, and don't worry too much about the logistical aspect of how it connects to the race. They all connect very well to the race.
I would echo that 100%, and I actually think that's a great answer, and I think it's the honestly it's the best answer. And I'm almost more inclined to like not think of convenience and transportation on a Disney race weekend because I think that you're less likely to get use out of the Skyliner and the monorail on a race weekend because you're
Right.
that early in the morning,
Yeah.
like even if they open it, you're not using it really. Like the monorail resorts, usually the monorail is open that early, so you do get that advantage, and it is an advantage particularly for your spectators. If they want to come watch you at Magic Kingdom, your wife and kids getting up and walking over from the Contemporary or the Polynesian at 5 in the morning is a lot easier than them hauling over from Coronado Springs. Like that is something to consider if you've got little kids and a family. But at the same time, the course runs right in front of Coronado Springs. My favorite picture I have with my kids is at like mile 20 something, and my kids are at the front entrance to Coronado Springs watching me run by. That's really cool. And so, every resort has its own benefit, and you really shouldn't think about convenience or beach club because it's, got this unique location or whatever. If you love beach club, stay at beach club. I think that's a great point. Matt, again, thank you as always for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, and best of luck in your race this weekend
Thank
and
you.
marathon weekend. And we'll make sure if you're interested in connecting with Matt, all of his socials are going to be in the show notes. So we'll make sure we have those for you. We'll also have his charity if you want to support him running his race. Will be linked in the show notes. And if you want to get your vacation planned with me for any Run Disney race weekend, my services, as always, are completely free to you as a travel agent with the Magic for Less Travel. We'll have links to that in the show notes as well. And I would love to help you plan a great vacation. And Matt, we'll see you on social media running this weekend.
See you out there.
All right, appreciate it, man. Thank you as always.